And it's kind of bizarre because like out of a movie. These two people, I still remember today very clearly from what they were wearing, very nicely dressed. And I remember someone knocking on the door and Mr. Elizondo, there's some people here to see you, which is not uncommon. You're always working issues, so you're trying to fix things. So sure, bring them on in. They came in and they said, hey, you're Lue Elizondo. And I said, yes, I am Lue. Can we talk to you? And I said, sure. And one of them shut the door behind them, my door. And I'm like, okay, this is probably not good. I often joke, what did I do now? Right. I probably upset somebody. And they sat down and they started to say, hey, look, we are part of the intelligence community. We're part of a program. We're not going to tell you much about it, but do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself? And I probably was a little rude. I probably was a little bit standoffish because I don't particularly like talking about myself, especially if I don't know who you are. And they started asking very pointed questions. So specifically about, we hear that you're a counterintelligence guy. We hear that you did some background before. You have some background in advanced avionics and aerospace industry. Is that true? And yes, do you mind sharing with us? I said, well, I'll share with you at the unclassified level the type of systems I worked on, but I'm really not comfortable going into any more detail. And so long story short, they agreed they would come back and have another discussion with me. And so when they left, I ran some trap lines to find out that they were legit. They were part of a special program, but I didn't have clearance into it. So I really didn't know, but they really were who they said they were. They were part of a small organization. And I presumed at the time had something to do with aerospace, but I really didn't know. And then a couple more trips they came by, we talked, got a little bit more comfortable. They got more comfortable with me. I certainly got more comfortable with them. And finally they said, we'd like to have you meet our director. And I said, okay, sure, no problem. It might have been, John, probably 7 or 10 days later, I had an appointment to go meet. I was hoping the director would come see me. Mm-hmm. I thought I was sufficiently senior enough where, you want to come see me, you can come see me. Instead, they're like, okay, be at this location at this time at this place and don't tell anybody you're coming. So again, a little bit unusual. I'm like, I'm sorry, who are you? Mm-hmm. So I decided to go ahead and do it. And I told my deputy at the time, hey, I'm going to go to this meeting. I went to it. And it was at an undisclosed location in also the National Capital Region. Looked a bit just like a normal office building, really, until you go inside and then you realize that you have, guards and whatnot. And you're like, okay, no, this is probably a little bit more sensitive. I remember going up the elevator up to the floor, and it looked like an office building you would see like on Wall Street, really. Cubicles all over the place and people kind of making copies and doing work diligently on their computers. And there was this corner office, kind of looked like glass, and the individual sitting back in there. And what struck me is that the individual was, I don't want to stereotype, but if you would ever think of what a rocket scientist looks like, he was your quintessential rocket scientist. Mm-hmm. Glasses, very, very appeared very astute and very no nonsense. So I went, I introduced myself, shook his hand. Hey, glad you're here. He didn't smile. He was just very serious. And he looked at me. He was staring at me. I felt almost a little uncomfortable because I know he was assessing the hell out of me. And I was trying to assess him as well. But obviously, he probably knew a little bit more about me than I knew about him, which is never really good to go into a meeting like that as an intelligence officer. You kind of want to, if you will, know thy enemy. Not saying he was my enemy by any stretch, but you want to know who you're dealing with. And he introduced himself, and I'm sure at some point his name will become very public. I have, out of respect for him, I've never mentioned his name. He's asked me never to mention it until he's comfortable with his name being out, so I won't. But we talked. We had a very good, candid conversation, and that's when he asked me. I mean, he started asking me about my background in aerospace and the type of technologies I worked on, and this is a guy who he knew his stuff. I mean, he was like literally by definition, a rocket scientist, mm-hmm. and probably one of the best ones that we had in the government. And that's when, he asked me, he said, what do you think about, it was, John, he looked him straight in the face, and looking back, it was so weird because I wasn't sure if he was like testing me or if it was legit. But he said, what do you think about the topic of UFOs? Now, coming from my world, to test somebody, we will use provocative statements sometimes and then gauge their body language and, micro behaviors and neurolinguistics to see if, they're prone to, flights of fancy and things like that, And, but he was looking at me very serious. And I said, well, I don't really think about UFOs. And he says, what, you don't think they're real? I said, no, I didn't say that. I never really had the luxury to think about UFOs. I'm not particularly a huge science fiction fan. I never really watched X-Files or anything like that. And I've been so consumed with my work that when I'm not working, I'm at home and I'm a father. But those are really the only things I ever have time for: work, and which didn't involve anything at all involving UFOs, clearly, and raising a family. So he said, okay, that's fair. And he said, but let me just caution you or warn you, something to that effect. Let me caution you that don't let your analytic bias get in the way. And he said, you're gonna see things that you may have a hard time reconciling. Now, at this point, I hadn't even accepted it. I hadn't been offered even really a job, right? So I'm thinking to myself, is this a pitch? Are you offering me a job? Or is this just advice for life, to take with me? And what the hell's really going on here? So I nodded my head and said, no, very, very fair point, right? I don't really have an opinion yet on it. And then we agreed, had another conversation, but he said, look, I'm looking for a counterintelligence guy. For those in your audience who may not know what really counterintelligence is, a lot of people think they know what CI is. CI is really knowing what the enemy knows about you, right? So foreign intelligence collection is learning what the bad guys know. Counterintelligence is knowing what the bad guys know about you. So if you think of a chessboard, if you are playing chess against an opponent, foreign intelligence is knowing what their pieces can do on the chessboard and how they plan to move. Counterintelligence is knowing what they know about your pieces, right, and how you can move. So it's yet another layer of playing chess to some degree, I guess. Not any better or worse than other forms of intelligence. It's a very niche way of doing business from an intelligence perspective. So he started looking for a counterintelligence guy because we know that there are some foreign countries, foreign adversaries out there that probably know what we're doing. And I need a good counterintelligence and security program, which, by the way, it's not unusual. Anytime you have a sensitive program, you want to have good security and counterintelligence expertise. It's just an extra layer of, if you will, insurance to have to protect your program. So it wasn't unusual that I was being asked to provide counterintelligence expertise. I wasn't being asked to do anything with UFOs per se. It was just to come in and provide, the background that I already have, just use that in this capacity. So ultimately, long story short, obviously the rest is history. No pun intended. I said, sure, I'll accept the job. And it was at that point, through various conversations afterwards, I began to realize that these guys are legit. They're real. I mean, they have real data. And the individuals that were part of this effort, I knew from before, like people like Hal Puthoff and whatnot, that were, they were kind of legends in their own time anyways. So I knew this was a serious, legitimate effort. And then I began to see the documentation from the Senate and Congress. And I really began to recognize that this was a full-fledged program, but they really did need counterintelligence expertise. They didn't have anything. So they were kind of vulnerable from that perspective. Yeah, I know it's probably a long-winded explanation.
No, that's okay.
There we go. That's
obviously,
how I got involved.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it because I want the groundwork here. Now, in this next question, I want you to kind of clarify. You can do it quickly if you could. The difference between what we learned of the advanced aerospace weapons. Now I'm drawing a blank.
AAWSAP.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
The AAWSAP program. Then I get tongue-tied. Versus the program that you joined, that you just described, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or AATIP. What was the difference between the two? Because this has been an area of much confusion, not only by myself, But it seems like those that even worked on the program, which I'll explain in a moment.
Absolutely. Not only you, but I mean, honestly, probably to all of us to some degree in the beginning. So in the very beginning days, there was very little difference between AAWSAP and AATIP. There really wasn't a clear line distinction. There were focuses of the same effort. And what it was, you had portions of AAWSAP, which of course now know Bigelow Aerospace was part of, had some incredible scientists working at the ranch facility. And by the way, other places, it wasn't just the ranch.
And just to clarify, you're talking about Skinwalker Ranch.
I am.
Okay. So you're, and this is another one, but since you brought it up, I'll just ask it really quick. So AATIP or AAWSAP or both operated on the grounds of Skinwalker Ranch in Utah.
I want to be careful. I don't want to answer for Bob Bigelow or the former director of the program, because those are probably nuances you'd have to ask them. Okay. I will say that it involved the ranch. AAWSAP was looking at the phenomenon through a very broad lens, and that's what they were doing.
Okay.
And by the way, there was some pretty compelling data. I'll share with you that there was some very compelling data. Some of it was a little bit disturbing, to be honest with you.